Hello. A little bit late, again, because of more technological problems again. Every day is like a, every day my daily practice is just literally all I need to recover from the trauma of setting it up. So anyway, here we are. Thank you for waiting, if you have waited in fact. I'm going to start lying down. And just a reminder, or the first little guidance for somebody joining the first time. I'm just doing my practice. It's a kind of hybrid practice of a lot of different things, mostly Feldenkrais inspired and then developed, and a little bit of Pilates every now and again. Really a kind of very holistic movement practice. The key being that you... Not live, apparently. YouTube says I'm live. Am I live or am I not live? Now I'm live. So the key is just that you take it as a structure for yourself to play with. Really follow your own pleasure and curiosity, and if you want to do more than I'm doing, go further and do more and work harder and train a bit more hardcore. And if you want to do less, pause more, rest more, even stop halfway through. I tend to get a little bit stronger at the end, a bit more muscular work towards the end of the practice. If you feel like you've just had enough at that point and you want to chill out and just have a very sort of calming practice, you can just stay there and not do the bit that feels a bit more muscular and challenging. And I'm going to talk it through in the first person as usual, so that it's clear that it's me talking about me and my own experiences and my own sensation, as a kind of invitation to you to do the same for yourself, basically. So I'm going to start lying down. Oh, I think today is the latest. I'm so gutted. I'm really late today. Today is the latest I've started, I think. So I'm just going to lie down. I'm going to spend... I just realised I should have said something. I was muddled because of the tech issues. I'm on a carpet with a nice blanket on top, and today I'm going to spend a lot of time on my knees. So really make sure if you're practicing at home and you aren't on a nice carpet with a nice soft blanket, get some extra things, get some towels to put underneath you, some blankets. Just really make sure that you're comfortable while you're doing it. It's really important that you benefit from it and you don't just bruise yourself, basically. So make yourself comfortable. So, starting again, lying down, just seeing where we are, where I am. Noticing my contact with the floor. Just noticing my general state, my state of being right now. So allowing in information, allowing myself to reflect on and process information on my whole self. Maybe physical sensations, certain parts of my body, but also my other senses, sounds I can hear, the light. And the way my thoughts are moving, and my feelings. And as I notice those things, I just try to sort of let go into it. I'm switching into a state of observing.
so that I can just notice what I'm doing, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling as I'm doing it. And I just get an impression of how I'm making contact with the ground, a little bit more to the physical body, my imprint, scanning, noticing the parts that steal my attention. Often a little discomfort or pain steals focus. So I just stay with it for long enough that I can notice other things. Particularly I notice my imprint with the ground. That's just a reference point for me. How do I sense my shoulders against the curve by the knee, all the way down to the curve by the lower leg and the ankle, down over the heel, around the feet, getting a sense of where my toes are pointing. I'm doing a kind of outline of myself. And the outline helps me sense the length and direction of either leg. I keep in my mind's eye tracing up the outer edge of my legs, past my ankle, the outside edge of my leg, my shins, my knees. It depends on the orientation of the leg in space, what feels like it's the outside at the moment. All the way up to the thighs and the outside of the pelvis. That helps me sense the orientation of my pelvis in space, and I keep tracing in my mind's eye up past the pelvis to my waistline, and as I trace this line from my pelvis to my waistline and then up the sides of my ribs, I can sense that I'm a little shorter on one side of my ribs than the other. I'm a little more compressed on one side than the other of my ribs, and I keep tracing up the line to my armpits, and that helps me sense where my armpits are in space. And I trace down the inner arm to the elbows, down the lower arm to the hands, and I just roughly get a sense of the fingers in space, where they're pointing, how they're placed on the ground, all the way up the outer edge of the hand, the back of the hand, maybe the wrist, the lower arm, up the upper arm, to my shoulders, getting a sense of where my shoulders are in space, comparing either side. And drawing lines from my upper arm over my shoulder to over the trapezius to the base of my neck. I can sense the distance from the neck to the shoulder on each side. I sense that that's a little different. And I trace up the side of my neck in my mind's eye until I can just draw a line that goes all the way up past my jaw, noticing the curve of my neck on either side, also a little different one side to the other. Curve of my neck over my ears and up until the line meets at the crown of my head. And I just close my eyes for a second, and I try to bring into focus that whole line, that whole border of myself. And then I expand that awareness so that rather than being a two-dimensional outline of myself, I just try to make it three-dimensional, and I kind of process my own experience of my own volume. And then I roll over, and I'm going to start on my hands and knees. And I'm coming to my hands and knees. Which way do I want to be? I think I want to be facing the window. So I'm coming to my hands and knees. And I'm just being in this position to start with. I'm just noticing what it's like. I notice where I've got my weight, where I've put my hands and knees. I notice that if I try and relax in this position, then my weight is a little bit more over one knee than the other. And one hand is a little bit more underneath my shoulder than the other. So I'm not trying to be in a correct position. I'm just coming into 4 points of contact with the ground, and noticing where does my weight go without me thinking about it too much. And from there, I keep that position and I just start to move my weight around. So for me, my weight went straight away to my left knee a little bit. So I just allow that to happen. I send my pelvis where it's already going. And I let that move my pelvis, it moves my lower leg a little bit. Just exploring where my weight already was and going a little bit more in the direction I already noticed. And even in this position, even if I didn't sense anything, even if I couldn't notice where my weight was, still I could move a little bit my hands and feet and just play with where my weight is. So I'm just doing a little exploration of where my weight is. Also I have a slightly uneven floor, so I move my hands and knees around a little bit on the floor, and I just keep experiencing where is my weight. And I just keep trying to sort of soften through my torso and feel that the position of my hands and knees on the floor, as I change that position a little bit, that can allow me to open up or move or soften or feel the force going through my torso in different ways, different parts. And I notice what my head is doing, and I'm just going to keep moving my hands and knees around a little bit. This is a slightly kind of Bambi exploration, like I'm not assuming stability, I'm just looking for different ways of being on these 4 points. Maybe sometimes my weight is more over my hands, sometimes my weight is more towards my heels. Certainly if I want to rest my wrists, I sit down over my heels. And I come back again. And as I continue to move around between these 4 points, I just let my back move, I let my rib move. I let my toes move even as I want. I'm particularly aware of my toes because I have bad knees, so sometimes I need to tuck my toes underneath to make my knees more comfortable. And I'm just shifting my weight really as simply as I can. I'm practicing this kind of soft focus that can shift around my body just so that I can notice what it's like being in my body in this moment. And maybe the moving can shift my attention to different parts of myself. I can also feel my skin against my clothing, and that can help me notice different parts of myself. So I'm trying to expand my awareness of myself and take in different parts of myself. And not just always pay attention to the same parts. And then I just sit back over my heels and I rest my forehead on the floor. Actually, right now I want to rest the side of my head on the floor, so I just do that. So I just sit over my heels and I just rest in whatever way is comfortable. And then I come back to my hands and knees. And I do a little bit more of an intentional play with where my head can go. And I'm still allowing my weight to shift. I'm still moving my hands and knees around a little bit. But I'm intentionally now using my eyes. I'm using the proprioceptors on my head. I am sighted, so I use my eyes to look around me. For non-sighted person, then maybe they would use the ears in a different way. I could play with closing my eyes and using my ears. I can also play with my nose, my smell.
I can sense the light coming through my eyelids, and all of these things, I just allow them to let me shift my weight between my 4 points until gradually my weight is shifting and I have nothing restricted. Nothing is not allowed. The only thing that's not allowed is discomfort. So I'm shifting and I find myself in sitting, and then I come back and I find myself on my knees again and turning and using my head, my eyes, my smell. I have a yawn, using my mouth, feeling the air on my tongue. I use those things to move my spine, so that everything I do can move not just my head, but my spine and my whole self, so I can start to move around a little bit. And just like I did when I was on the floor before, and I was lying down, I try to now shift my awareness to my outline. I'm trying to sense my outline, because if I can sense my outline, I can be a bit more aware of my sides. So when my head is leading me one way and everything follows my head, I can feel that that has an effect on my spine, and that has an effect on my ribs. And if I pay attention to my outline, I can feel one side of my ribs gets shorter, the other side of my ribs gets longer. And I'm really comfortable on my hands. I'm really used to taking a lot of weight on my hands, so I'm spreading my hands out and enjoying that sensation. But anytime I needed to rest, I would just come off my hands, or maybe I also just play with different grips, so I can have a fist. That's nice, actually. I'm going to just play a little bit with this slightly more ape-like, kind of gorilla-like arms. I'm going to use these fists to keep moving around, but now with a little bit of a bend in my arms. Then I can play with the rotation of my arms. I'm still primarily staying on my knees, but I just feel that every now and again I want to push off my knees onto my toes or extend a leg. I'm already at the stage where I want to just play with a little bit more weight on my hands, but I'm only doing what's comfortable, and I'm still using my head to lead and letting my head implicate the rest of my spine. And I'm just going to take a full rest and lie down. Arms and legs long, just to check in with myself and feel now how I'm making contact with the floor. And I just roll my head a little bit. See how that feels. I notice the outline of my body again. I do a swifter scan. I sense my own volume. I sense the changes that have happened since I was last here. And then I come back, roll by on my side, and I come back to all fours. And I want to play a little bit more with shifting weight between my hands and my knees and my feet. And I just do that in any way that I want. So I'm still shifting my weight between my hands and knees. And I shift weight between my hands, my knees and my feet.
And I see what that does in different ways, and I'm going to keep it quite linear for now. So whereas before I was twisting and turning to the side a lot, going around in circles, a little bit like an animal in a cage on my blanket really. Now I want to keep it quite forwards and backwards, just because it helps me explore something a little bit more specific in terms of the length of my body. I try to notice, I just keep moving, I just keep a general hands and feet experience. Some people won't be able to get their hands and their feet on the floor so close together as I can, and then you just will be playing with more distance and really just play with what's comfortable. I'm only ever doing what's comfortable. Some people will be able to take all of their weight very easily just onto their hands, and that's another exploration if that's interesting. But generally I'm keeping my hands and feet close to the floor for now, just because I'm playing with how my center moves according to where my weight is on my hands, knees and feet. And now I get rid of that linear aspect and I keep shifting between my hands, knees and feet, and I get rid of the obligation to be linear so that I can start to get more movement into my spine again. And I just play very, very, very softly with twisting my spine. I can sit, I can kneel, I just do what's comfortable. So my intention is exploring hands, knees and feet on the ground. But I can do that in many ways, and I can be forgiving enough that sometimes I kneel or just sit. Sometimes I come off my wrists, sometimes I come onto my fists again. And yeah, this could be just such a small little exploration. For some people, maybe this is just staying on the hands and knees and shifting weight, and that's enough, or exploring the fists for the first time. Maybe if I want to start challenging my center a little bit more and taking my hands and feet further away from my center. So what if my hands aren't directly underneath my shoulders anymore, but they're further away, and I can start to shift my weight between points that are not so directly underneath me, and I can twist and start to take one point away from the floor, and I'm just trying to keep moving, changing these points. I'm going to stay for myself, I'm going to stay just on my hands and feet for a while, because that opens up different possibilities for me. But I could very easily come down to my knees. I'll do that soon. So again, I'm just doing what's possible and what's comfortable and keeping it soft. And it's just an exploration. I'm not doing it correctly. I'm not doing it as it should be done. I'm just exploring. And I start to see how different parts can come away from the floor. And now that I'm doing this exploration with hands and feet a bit more, and that I'm taking my hands away, my feet away from my center, so they're further away, that invites positions which might be a little bit more easy to stretch into, and I'm just still trying to not push into a really extreme stretch. So I'm doing quite a lot of upper body work today in a very soft way, but trying to support my upper body with my center
all of the shifting weight I was doing in the beginning. I'm just going to go back to that to remember that everything that happens through my hands and knees has an effect on my center, and I'm just trying to let that exist. I'm trying to let my center move, let my ribs move, let my belly move, keep my jaw soft. And I'm going to have a rest. This time I want to rest on my belly, just make myself comfortable. And then I come back to my hands and knees. And I'm going to stay with my hands and knees for a while. And I'm just going to softly cross one leg over the other and then let it come back. So I softly cross one leg over the other and then let it come back. So one leg goes behind the other. The knee crosses right over and then it comes back. One leg crosses behind the other, the knee crosses right over and then it comes back. And I'm doing that a few times. I'm very familiar with that movement, so I'm ready to move on quite quickly, but I only move on when I'm ready. You could spend just an hour doing just that if you wanted. So once I've been doing that for a while, I start to play with where my feet go once I've crossed my legs over, and where my head and pelvis go. There's some sweeping of the feet on the floor that's possible, and I play with my head looking in different directions. So I'm just crossing one foot over, playing with what happens. Can I send my feet in different places? And this is so different for everybody. So I'm really just looking for what I'm enjoying today. And I just keep going. Playing with where my weight is. Only ever doing what's comfortable. When I find a stretch, I just hang around on the edge of it. I don't push into it. I just explore it without really thinking, ah, yeah, I've got to stretch. And then I play with crossing my legs a different way. So before I was crossing my legs by lifting the back knee around the back. So it crosses. I'll do that a few times for camera so you can see the simple version. I'm crossing one leg over the back of the other. This is another Feldenkrais series, by the way, but I'm bastardizing it as usual. In this practice, at least. So this is the option where one leg crosses around the back of the other. Now I'm going to do the other option where one foot has to cross all the way in front of the other. How is that possible? One foot has to cross in front of the other knee, so I end up in the same position, but I got there a different way. I'll revise the other way. One way, the leg crosses behind and comes back. The leg crosses behind and comes back. The other way, the leg crosses in front and comes back. The leg crosses in front and comes back. And I just do it one more time each way because I need to rest, I think. And I'm really letting my back move, letting my jaw be soft, letting my hips move. And I'm only doing what's possible. And then I have a lie down. I'm going to lie on my back. Noticing my contact with the floor, my outline, the boundary of myself, my volume. Comparing my two sides, observing my general state of being, my thoughts, my feelings, my environment, the sounds. And I bring my feet to standing. And I bring my arms above my shoulders, so my hands are above my shoulders. And I just gently open and close my hands a few times. And I just see how I do that. Each hand is a little bit different. And I rest them down. And I bring my knees over my belly to make myself comfortable there. And I just start to, my knees are starting soft over my belly. And I just start to pick my heels up a little bit and take my knees a little bit away. And then I let my knees come back in again. So I'm not fixing my spine. I'm trying to look for how this soft, small movement of my knees and my hips affects my pelvis. So I'm really paying attention, having established what the action is with my legs, that I'm slightly picking my heels up, and that is opening the back of my knees a little bit and taking my feet a little bit away from me. Having established that that is the action I want to do, I can then shift my focus as I'm doing that to the contact of my back with the ground, where my knees are against my belly. My whole back is softly opening into the ground. I can feel the back of my waistline more against the floor. When my legs come up a little bit and away, I can feel that that changes the contact of my pelvis. And I just play with that a little bit. So I'm just going to do a little Pilates version. I'm going to place both legs down. So what the strengthening does here is really important, because even though I want to play softly, I don't want to get to a place where I would take my legs so far away that my back starts to arch and it's uncomfortable for myself, or I feel worried about my back and my back is in a lot of tension. So I'm going to just make sure that I have a long spine. I'm not drawing my belly in and pushing my back into the floor. I'm not sticking my belly out or arching my back. I'm just having a long neutral spine, or whatever you call neutral. And then I use that gentle, juicy engaging of all of the abdominals to stabilize the spine, dropping tension away from the hip joints as I lift one leg and then lift the other. And I try to do that without moving my pelvis at all. So here is a really classic Pilates exercise. And I do that again. And if any, slipping into third person and into teaching mode, but if anybody's new to this, then just explore really just that very simple. It can take a lot of awareness to try and just stabilize the pelvis with such a simple action. So I'm doing this version where I stabilize the pelvis. Now actually I'm going to come up into a little curl up so that it's easier for me to draw my belly in, even though I'm then working harder in my upper abdominals. It's easier for me to feel the support across the back. And I'm lifting one leg at a time, and I'm trying to stay wide across the collarbones. I look around a little bit. And my pelvis is
more or less stable all the time. I change which leg is lifting first. I'm working harder now. And I lay my head down, and I lay my feet down, and I lengthen my legs and I just rest. So now that I've just reminded myself of a very clear, very basic relationship of the abdominals and to the back, of the strengthening of the center while the hips remain free and mobile, then I'm going to get rid of this rigid spine and this rigid muscularity. I'm just going to bring my knees onto my back again and roll. And then I'm going to play again with, from this position, which is not a neutral spine, I have my back on the floor, I just start to see what it feels like to take one leg a little bit away and to let my pelvis roll. Where do I go to before I feel like I need to start really working? I get to about here with one leg before I start to feel like I need to work really hard. Not really hard, but just harder in the lower abdominals. Then I need to work harder to lengthen that leg away and keep my pelvis stable so that my back isn't arching. And then it comes easy and soft again. So I do the same thing. I just play in different ways with taking my feet away from my center, noticing how it changes the contact of my back of my body with the floor. Trying to find soft places for the legs, a softness, a freedom of the legs, without coming into a big arch. So the reason I'm doing one leg at a time is because I just feel that that's easier for me at the moment. If I wanted to do both legs together, then I would have to work harder to stabilize. Let's try that. Ugh, I don't like that. I'm not ready for that. Got a delicate back today. Maybe I can do it if I come up again into a curl up, then I can take my legs away. So I'm really just only doing what's possible. Possible at the same time as feeling my pelvis stable and my hips supported, my hips soft. I give some rotation in my legs. Add a little curl up. And I soften down and I rest again. And I notice my contact with the floor and how I'm feeling. And I'm rolling back onto my side to come all the way back onto my belly. Onto my hands and knees. Not my belly, my hands and knees. And now I can do the same thing I was doing on my back. Taking my leg away from my center and towards my center and feeling how does that affect my lower back, my ribs and my belly. I play with one leg, I play with the other. I'm not trying to be rigid. I'm just seeing where can my leg go. I lengthen my leg away from my center, I can cross it over, I can open it up, I can bend it. I just try to stay soft, and I try to play with different ways of my leg relating to my center. Maybe I arch, maybe I lengthen, maybe I bend my leg, maybe I open it out to the side. So this is really a lot of muscular work around my glutes, around my hips. But I can always come down, and I'm staying on one leg for a while, and I play with that crossing over again. And I really feel my underneath leg, my supporting leg working. My muscles around the hips are really working. And I'm playing with the length of my back, and the shape of my spine and my ribs.
And then I rest my pelvis back for a moment, and I just shift my weight and I soften my back. And then I come forwards again and I play with the other leg, sliding it back, playing with where it goes, playing with how it affects my weight. I'm not necessarily trying to do the same thing on both sides. I'm noticing what do I want to do on each side. There are so many possibilities. Whether the foot is pointed or flexed, whether the leg is bent or straight, what's the orientation, the rotation of the hip joint, am I bending or lengthening my arms? If I let my elbows bend, suddenly there's a lot more that's possible. All the time, only what feels okay. I'm really managing a delicate back today, so I'm careful. Crossing one way, crossing the other, playing with the relationship of my toes and my heel to my center, my ribs, my shoulders. And then I rest again, I just rest back. And I just come up to kneeling. And I have one last play with where my legs can go. And this time I just take it wherever I want. So it might be that I want to just play for a little bit with something really small. Where is my head? Can I drop my head and let my head hang completely? Can I shrug my shoulders here in a soft way, exploring my shoulders in relation to my back? Shifting my weight backwards and forwards. There's some really nice opening up in the back of the body that I can find here as I allow my head to drop and my weight to shift around. And my pelvis to move and twist. And then I just develop it wherever I want. Again, looking for where my feet can go. Crossing over. Finding where do my feet go and how does that relate to my center? How does that relate to my shoulders? When are my feet pointed or flexed? When are my arms bent or straight? I go into a bend in my elbows, I'm taking a lot more weight, and am I expecting more strength from my arms? And I also allow myself now to explore arching the back, again only in whatever way is possible. Opening up the front of the hips, so this whole practice I've had my hips very closed, I've had my hip flexors short. So I'm now just allowing myself to sit into this opening up of the front of the body, of the not just of the front of the belly and the chest, but of the front of the hip flexors and the front of the fold where the hip crease is. I'm now allowing that to also open up. So here's an opportunity to work harder or be a little bit softer. How much work to be done in the arms? How much work to be done in the center? Where does the head go? All of it just soft. And I realise I can also open up my knees. I haven't played with having my knees really wide. So I have a little movement through my hips there and I just relax into it. So some days I feel like I'm more giving kind of exact instructions, and maybe the last few sessions I think I've been more doing kind of things that are really setting parameters for an exploration. And I clap my feet together. And I get my hands under my shoulders and have a wriggle my chest into the floor for a press up. And I'm going to come into a little press up with my knees wide like this. And sit my heels back with my knees wide and my big toes together. And then I'm coming forwards again into that little hip opening. For me, my hip flexors really don't open very well, so I'm careful of my lower back so that I don't send strain into my lower back just because my hip flexors won't open. So, and I gently twist through the pelvis and open and close my feet a little bit. And I do some little press ups here. I think these are pretty non-normative press ups, I would say. I can feel my soles of my feet pressing together, creating a nice bind through my legs. My spine is really long and I'm pivoting on my knees. That's a nice discovery. And then I come down and I open up a bit more and I arch a bit more and I squeeze my bottom to lift my knees off the floor here. And then I rest. And I just roll, wriggle and roll, rolling my pelvis side to side on the floor. Releasing my jaw, releasing my hips, releasing my legs. I turn my head the other way, releasing my belly. And I bring my hands back under my shoulders for another press up. And I just keep my legs really lazy and I press up. I try to just keep my legs completely lazy. Like I don't have any control of my legs. I'm trying to be completely passive in my legs and just push up. And I only do what's possible, even if I'm working harder. As soon as I feel any strain, I change something or I stop. And then I finish by crawling around again just a little bit. I cross one knee behind the other, I open my feet up as far as they can go away from each other, and I start to sit back between my feet. And this is an intentional stretch now. I'm intentionally stretching out my legs, my hips. I breathe into it and I stay alive. I don't just sit there, I have a little move. I've used these muscles around my hips a lot, so I'm just putting them into a position of lengthening now in the direction away from the contraction that I've been using them in, all of these. And I come forwards, and I uncross the back leg, and I cross over the other leg, and I open my feet wide, so there's room for my pelvis to sit back in between my feet. And I just wriggle into it a little bit, softly, softly, softly. So even though I'm stretching, I'm just doing what's comfortable. I'm not pushing into pain. I'm just going into, and just feel this is opening up the back of my hip joint. And then I come forwards again, and I uncross the back leg,
And I tuck my toes under and I just rock on my toes, stretching out my toes a little bit. And I come straight up to standing. And I just walk and see what it feels like to walk. I've been exploring this connection of weight bearing from my hands and my feet, so now what's that like? And I'm going to leave my practice there, but for anybody that wants, there are some interesting things to do. One thing would be to continue exploring hands and feet and come into some little practice of different weight transfer a little bit more dynamically in this little handstandy material. Making a little bit more creative out of it. Another thing that would be interesting would just be to lie down. I said I'm going to finish because I feel bad running over time and starting late, but I'm just doing it anyway. Lying down and seeing how you feel. Just a quick scan. A check-in with where I was compared to the beginning. I'm feeling quite different now. Taking in that information. And then, finishing in whatever way you fancy. Maybe noticing in standing. Always more to do. Always more. So thank you very much. Thanks for joining. Do spread, share, sharing my website, sharing my YouTube channel, sharing social media, blah, blah, blah. And my online schedule is now in operation as of yesterday. So this is a sort of chance for people to follow along really my lots of different methodologies that I practice and can share. But for real classes, I'm teaching on Zoom as well, obviously, like everybody else in the world. So for real classes in Pilates,